Come, you accidental pilgrims, you who find yourself on a journey of surprise and wonder. Come, you who emerge into this place as an act of liberation. Come, who seek a life of mindfulness and a place to test your thoughts. Come, you who bring hearts of all kinds, heavy hearts, rusty hearts, hearts broken, open in revelation, hearts full of love to share. Come, you who seek courage, and you who have more courage than you realize. Come, you who stand behind the curtain, gathering up the resources to claim your truth. Come, you who have been in a bubble, you who are poised for transformation. We begin our story again, gathering courage, love, mindfulness, and a sense of purpose. We gather as people of all ages, of different abilities, different backgrounds, and different perspectives. We share a covenant, a direction for our shared journey, and a commitment to encourage and challenge one another to spiritual growth. This path will ask much from us. Let us move forward with love. Let us move forward with appreciation for one another. Let us move forward knowing that we are not alone. Whoever you are, whatever your gifts, you are welcome to join this journey. And at this time, we'll have an opportunity to light the candles of community. You can light them for a joy or a concern or simply to bring more light into this space.
To rejoice and come in, and to rejoice and come in. Today will be a joyful day, and to rejoice and come in.
Open your ears to the song. Open your ears to the song. Today will be a joyful day, and to rejoice and come in.
Open your hearts, everyone. Open your hearts, everyone. Today will be a joyful day, and to rejoice and come in.
Don't be afraid of some change. Don't be afraid of some change. Today will be a joyful day, and to rejoice and come in.
And to rejoice and come in. And to rejoice and come in. Today will be a joyful day, and to rejoice and come in.
Let us stand and body our spirit for the lighting of the chalice and the spoken affirmation. We light this chalice to celebrate the inherent worth and dignity of every person, to reaffirm the historic pledge of liberal religion to seek that justice which transcends mere legality and moves toward the resolution of true equality, and to share that love which is ultimately beyond even our cherished reason, that love which unites us. Let us join in the spoken affirmation. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth and freedom, and to help one another. Let us be seated. Our opening thought comes from the philosopher Hannah Arendt, from her book, The Origins of Totalitarianism. Before mass leaders seized the power to fit reality to their lies, Their propaganda is marked by its extreme contempt for facts as such. For in their opinion, fact depends entirely on the power of the person who can fabricate it. First reading this morning comes from Brave New World, Revisited by Aldous Huxley. I'm aware that the readings today are a bit like readings from an anthology of dystopia, but hopefully the discourse will be a little less negative. From Brave New World, Revisited, Aldous Huxley writes, "The principles underlying propaganda are extremely simple. Find some common desire, some widespread unconscious fear or anxiety, Think out some way to relate this wish or fear to the product you have to sell. Then build a bridge of verbal or pictorial symbols over which your customer can pass from fact to compensatory dream, and from the dream to the illusion that your product, when purchased, will make the dream come true. They are selling hope. We no longer buy oranges, we buy vitality. We do not just buy an auto, we buy prestige. And so with all the rest. In toothpaste, for example, we buy not a mere cleanser and antiseptic, but release from the fear of being sexually repulsive. In vodka and whiskey, we are not buying a protoplasmic poison, which in small doses may depress the nervous system in a psychologically valuable way. We are buying friendliness and good fellowship, the warmth of Dingley Dell and the brilliance of the Mermaid Tavern. With our laxatives, we buy the health of a Greek god. With the monthly bestseller, we acquire culture, the envy of our less literate neighbors, and the respect of the sophisticated. In every case, the motivation analyst has found some deep-seated wish or fear whose energy can be used to move the customer to part with cash, and so indirectly to turn the wheels of industry. Let's be in an attitude of meditation as we hear these words from Matthew Fox. How important is truth? To grasp what is happening in America at this time, it might be good to first meditate on truth. For many, truth is another name for God. In my recent book on naming the unnameable, wonderful and useful names for God, including the unnameable God, truth is one of those important names for divinity. This means that when lies abound, God is banished, for God is truth. To approach truth is to approach God. To seek truth is to seek God. The pursuit of truth is a godly act. It is a prayer. Study is a prayer provided that the goal is not ego enhancement or fame or power, but that a pure heart is brought to the project. This means the study of anything, stars or birds, mathematics or engineering, psychology or the origins of life, the mystics or politics, all of it is a journey of the divine. Theologian David Bentley Hart writes, "In God lies at once the deepest truth of mind and the most universal truth of existence, and that for this reason the world can truly be known by us. We all seek truth, and we are all capable of finding some. Our yearning for truth is deeper than ethics, as Rumi, the poet, observes. They say you bring the word of God, yet all I hear is talk of good and bad, nothing of love or truth. And again, beyond the teachings of right and wrong, there lies a field. I will meet you there. God is a field of truth, the field where we encounter truth and truth encounters us. The Bhagavad Gita declares that a world without truth is a world without God, and in such a world, desire alone will rule." Mahatma Gandhi, father of the nonviolent revolutions that liberated India and colonial rule, and through Howard Thurman and Martin Luther King Jr. and many others undergirded the civil rights movement and was applied to South Africa by Nelson Mandela, had much to say about God as truth. Here are some of his teachings, so worth our meditating on in this time of untruth in media, politics, and many hearts and minds and souls. Gandhi said, "There is no God higher than truth. Truth is my God. Truth is the substance of all morality. Truth is God, and truth overrides all our plans. Without truth and nonviolence, there can be nothing but destruction of humanity. Truth is the first thing to be sought for, and beauty and goodness will then be added unto you. There is no other God than truth." Our next reading comes from the book Propaganda by Jacques Ellul. Those who read the press or their group and listen to the radio of their group are constantly reinforced in their allegiance. They learn more and more that their group is right, that its actions are justified, thus their beliefs are strengthened. At the same time, such propaganda contains elements of criticism and refutation of other groups, which will never be read or heard by a member of another group. Thus we see before our eyes how a world of closed minds establishes itself. A world in which everybody talks to themselves, everybody constantly views their own certainty about themselves and the wrongs done them by others, a world in which nobody listens to anybody else. So the discourse this morning is titled Pernicious Propaganda, a title that goes along very nicely with those readings from the anthology of dystopia that we've been reading thus far. One of the things that I noticed over the past few election cycles, it's been there all along, but definitely more so over the past few election cycles, is the effectiveness of propaganda through social media. There have been some attempts recently to try to deal with some of the misinformation and disinformation that is out there, and those attempts might be dismantled soon, at least in the case of Twitter. But the effectiveness of what many people call clickbait sites, and what I call clickbait propaganda sites, can be seen across the political spectrum, and also it can be seen on behalf of all of the candidates. Almost all of the candidates either benefit from, or sometimes they actually don't benefit from, this clickbait propaganda when it's speaking out against their views. But it's been taken, this clickbait propaganda has been taken to a new level over the past few election cycles. These sites are often funded and supported and operated by super PACs, right? Super political action committees, and oftentimes we don't know where the money is coming from that's funding these groups. A lot of it's money that's secret, or it's funded by other political organizations with significant financial resources. These sites have thoroughly permeated social media. At least they did until the last election cycle. Authors of the articles on these clickbait sites often say things about opposing candidates and opposing views that the candidates themselves would be unlikely to say for fear of being accused of making unfair or unfounded criticisms. Granted that this doesn't seem to bother some of the candidates. Some of the candidates just throw out those unfounded criticisms themselves, but oftentimes they let the propagandists do it for them. These super PAC groups do it for them. If the sites and the authors are caught dealing in falsehoods, the candidate on whose behalf they are operating can easily distance themselves and say that the site is not related to the campaign. The operators of these websites can do the dirty work of spreading a negative narrative about political opponents while the candidates themselves appear to remain above the fray. It's easy to make numerous sites like this on behalf of a candidate, creating the effect of various sites mutually reinforcing one another. Oftentimes these sites are operated by the same people, but there's just many different sites out there, and it looks like a lot of people are saying it. And we all know that if enough people are saying it, if a lot of people are saying it, it must be true. If you say it enough in as many venues as possible, the greater likelihood that it becomes more believable for a larger group of people. The willingness of these sites and other forms of propaganda to use half-truths, and sometimes simply to use no truths, to promote a particular candidate or cause is disturbing in and of itself. But perhaps even more disturbing is how willingly so many of us seem to click on these sites, to simply click on these sites and oftentimes to believe what they're telling us. And then, not only do many of us click on them, we click on them and we share them. Even when it would only take a bit of research to see that many of these articles contain gross distortions of fact. But the articles confirm our biases. When we're drawn to these articles and we click on them and we share them without looking at them closely and really doing careful research to see if they're distorting the truth or not, it's often because the articles are confirming our biases. They're telling us what we want to hear. And so like clickbait robots, we click and share, click and share, click and share. We know that political propaganda is nothing new. Even before these clickbait sites, there was plenty of political propaganda out there. It has been present in various forms throughout the history of our country, throughout the history of humankind. Political propaganda has been promulgated through speeches, pamphlets, whisper campaigns, magazines, print ads, radio ads, films, TV ads, even through great musicals. Oklahoma, look at it closely. It's a great piece of propaganda in terms of trying to promote a certain way of thinking and acting in relation to what the United States is about. I say great piece of propaganda. I think all propaganda is also pernicious in nature. What makes the clickbait phenomenon, though, and the use of the internet to promulgate propaganda so problematic and so pernicious is that the propaganda is something that is present before us at all times. It permeates our existence. We basically swim in a sea, in an ocean of propaganda, and we not only are passive participants experiencing the propaganda through various forms of media, we now have become more active and willing participants in the spreading of the propaganda with all of its half-truths and sometimes its no-truths. We become active propagandists ourselves rather than participatory citizens acting in integrity. In the expediency of doing whatever it takes for our side to win, we continue to lose the bonds of trust with one another that are so vital to the virtue and flourishing of human community in our nation. Propaganda was bad enough when it came through print media, films, and TV, but with the rise of the digital age, and especially smartphones, exposure to propaganda is never more than a few clicks away. It is the propagandist's dream. Almost total immersion of the public in propaganda during every waking hour of our existence. Such constant exposure to propaganda can overwhelm even the most discerning of us. We're all prone to it. We all can be caught up in it. Even if we think we know better, even if we think we're more intelligent than that, or more savvy than that, or more wise than that, we can all be caught up in it. Propaganda is not simply the same as messaging. This is really important, I think, to hear. A lot of times, people will say, well, propaganda is just about messaging. Propaganda is not problematic. Propaganda is not pernicious. It's simply about messaging, but it's not simply the same as messaging. One can be simultaneously concerned about effective messaging and truth. You can be concerned both about effective messaging and truth, but propaganda has little concern for the truth. Its main focus is persuasion. Propaganda will make use of whatever it takes to persuade people to act in a certain way, to act for the cause in question. Propaganda will at times use truth, at times use half-truths, at times use lies, and at times use various combinations of all of these, depending on what is deemed to be most effective at persuading the targeted audience. It's not even that focused on what people believe. That's more what would be called ideology, according to Jacques Ellul. Propaganda is about getting people to act in a certain way. Even when propaganda uses truth or half-truths, pursuing truth is not the goal. persuading people to believe and act in a certain way, and thus control them. That's the goal. In reflecting on this widespread nature of pernicious propaganda within our society, and especially within our political arena, I've been thinking through this over the past few years and trying to find potential ways that we could create some systems that might actually offset the pernicious effects of political propaganda in the United States. One system that I've been focusing on with a number of people in Oklahoma and around the country is to try to bring about a new system of voting in the United States. This is a nonpartisan issue, by the way. So this is not a politically partisan focus at all, but to bring about a new system of voting in the United States, which is called ranked choice voting. Sometimes it's also known as instant runoff voting. And what you can do in ranked choice voting is when you go to the polls to vote, when you go to the ballot box to vote, you rank your preferences. 1, 2, 3, maybe you can go to 4 or 5 in some cases. And if you're allowed to do that, if you're allowed to rank your preferences and have an instant runoff, if your first preference doesn't get enough votes to go into the next round of the runoff, then your vote goes to your second preference. And then if that second preference doesn't get enough votes in the next round of the runoffs, and nobody gets over 50% of the vote, your vote goes to your third preference. What this allows for is you can go to the ballot box and vote for your first choice every time without worrying about hurting your second choice, and also without worrying about harming, or helping rather, your least favorite choice. So today, with the kind of winner-takes-all system that we have, and this kind of two-party system that we have as well, we end up going to the ballot box and sometimes holding our noses as we vote strategically. We don't want to waste our vote. We don't want our vote to be a spoiler. We don't want to help our least favorite candidate, so we often go and vote for someone that we think's okay, but it's not the one we really want to vote for. So ranked choice voting, I believe, could weaken the hold that the two major parties have over our political discourse. If it's just a matter of voting D or R, then all of the political propaganda that we have becomes focused on getting us to act in the D direction or the R direction. It becomes a situation of bifurcation. So instead of having meaningful debate about what's really going to be good for the human community as a whole, the political propaganda gets us to act in the D direction or to act in the R direction. But if people can vote their first choice every time without worrying about harming their second choice or helping their least favorite choice, it will bring more diversity. More people will become involved in the political process. More people will run for office because they won't worry about being the spoiler. They won't worry about harming another candidate that they also happen to like. And what we will see is that there will be less division, more diversity, less bifurcation in our political processes. It will also likely, over time, increase voter participation, increase political participation among people within society because they don't have to go and simply vote strategically rather than voting for their favorite choice. I've heard this with young people especially all the time because I teach in a university. They say, there's nobody there that I'm interested in voting for. Why should I vote? No one excites me. No one really believes what I believe. And sometimes they just don't vote, and that can happen across all ages. But if you know you can vote your first choice every time, perhaps people will be more likely to actually go to the ballot box. So that's just one way. That's just one system that I think if we changed could help move us away from the effects of pernicious propaganda in our political system. But I think the very best way overall within our society to fight the effects of pernicious propaganda is for us to have actual conversations with people. As much as possible in the age of COVID, face-to-face conversations with people, not too close, but actual real-time conversations, not comments back and forth on a Facebook page or on some other social media page. I mean, there's a place for that perhaps, but you're really not talking to the person when you're doing that. You tend to be talking at the views of the person as opposed to actually having a conversation with the person. So I think the very best way for us to move in a direction away from the effects of pernicious propaganda is to have actual relationships, actual conversations with real people, and as much as we possibly can, as difficult as it may be, with persons who don't always see eye to eye with us, with persons that don't always agree with us. We may not persuade the other person to our side, and they probably may not persuade us to their side, but in the conversation, in the relationship, we develop not only relationship, but empathy and some understanding for the other person's perspective. So if we really focus on connecting with people, connecting with family and friends, even those who disagree with us, connecting with nature as well, getting out there, getting our hands in the soil like some of you did a few weeks ago, growing our own food, preparing meals together, talking together, having personal relationships with each other. If we do those things, I think it helps us a little bit. It doesn't solve the problem of pernicious propaganda, but it helps us get away from the constant drumbeat of propaganda in our lives. And also, I think it's important for us to disconnect some from our computers, from our smartphones, from all of that digital world around us where we are immersed in this propaganda every hour that we are awake. And finally, one thing that I think can help us move away from the effects of pernicious propaganda is that when we read something on the internet, when we read something on social media, for goodness sake, let's think before we simply click and share. But let's not think too much about giving to Red River UU, which is what we're going to do now. Yes, do think about it, but think about it in a positive way. So if you would like to bring your gifts to the table, you can also give your gifts online as well.
We are gentle and good people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are gentle and good people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are and of many colors, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are and of many colors, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are in a straight together, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are in a straight together, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are peaceful, loving people, and we are singing, singing for our lives. We are peaceful, loving people, and we are singing, singing for our lives.
Our parting thought comes from George Orwell. Let us stand in body or spirit for the parting thought. And if all others accepted the lie which the party imposed, if all records told the same tale, then the lie passed into history and became truth. Who controls the past, ran the party slogan, controls the future. Who controls the present, controls the past. Let us join together in extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.